right, we'll call the meeting to order. And can we have the roll call, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Benami?
Here.
Commissioner Hudis?
Here.
Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Janoff?
Here.
Commissioner Birch?
Here.
Vice Chair Kane?
Here.
And Chair O'Donnell.
Here. If you'll all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Hudis will lead us.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any subcommittee reports? Seeing none, we're going to go into verbal communications so that anyone in the audience who wants to speak about something that is not on the agenda will have an opportunity to do that. When we're through with that, and we get into the agenda, then we ask you to turn in these cards, which you will find on the back or the front of the benches, depending where you're sitting. And we will call you then in order. But I have one, I guess, verbal communication not on the agenda. Brian, I can't read the writing, I think. Mekachek? Yes. Okay. It was good printing, but I couldn't read it. I'm sorry.
Hi, Brian Mekachuk, 55 Roberts Road. I wanted to speak to you tonight and just give you an update on 15860, 15880, 15894 Winchester Boulevard. This was scheduled to come in front of you on a date certain, March 22nd, but it's been moved forward or pushed back until April. I'm not sure of the date. I just want to give you an update. The applicant has met with the neighbors twice, and I think that's a very positive thing. I'm one of the neighbors. I live within 300 feet, and they asked us for feedback, and we provided feedback at the first meeting. Then they, at the end of that meeting, they said, hey, we think that we should speak with you again. Are you willing to meet with us again? And everyone was delighted and said absolutely, so we met with them a second time. So I'm not sure what's going on, but it's all positive, and I just wanted to give you an update and let you know that things are moving forward. We're having a discussion with the applicant. Thank you.
All right, the next thing we will consider is consent items, and I'm going to move item number 3 into consent items because indeed that's what it is. Number 3 is 360 Bella Vista, and they're asking for a continuance. And so if we can, I will put that in the consent items and ask if anybody wants to take anything off the consent items. And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the 3 consent items. Yes? Your motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. All right. All those in favor? Aye. It passes unanimously. All right, that moves us to item number 4, which is 16 Pennsylvania Avenue, and I'd ask for a staff report.
Yes, good evening, Planning Commissioners. The subject R1 zone 1,400 square foot site is located on the north side of Pennsylvania Avenue. The property contains a 3,500 square foot 2-story home with an attached 2-car garage. The site is sloped, and from the street view, the home presents itself as a single-story home. The home has a partial basement in the rear of the home, and the existing home currently exceeds the maximum allowable square footage by 1,217 square feet. The condition of the existing foundation requires replacement, and the applicant has applied to lower the slab of the existing unfinished portion of the basement and cellar area by 2 feet. In doing so, there would be an addition of 943 square foot basement and a 485 square foot cellar. The project's being referred to Planning Commission because the applicant is requesting to exceed the maximum allowable floor area ratio by a total exceedance of 2,159 square feet, and this includes the existing attic. The proposed 4,466 square foot residence would have the largest floor area in the immediate area, as well as the largest floor area. However, the proposed square footage is within the existing footprint, which would not add scale or mass or height to the existing building and would remain the same scale to the existing streetscape. The applicant has provided a letter of justification in Exhibit 4, and on September 28th, the Historic Preservation Committee reviewed the proposed exterior modifications for doors and windows, recommended approval with a slight modification to align the basement windows with the first floor windows, and the applicant has included those into the attached development plans in Exhibit 10. The applicant has reached out to their neighbors. Staff has received 3 letters of support and 1 letter opposed to the project. If Planning Commission can make the required findings found in Exhibit 2, staff would recommend approval of the application, subject to the recommended conditions of approval found in Exhibit 3. This concludes staff's report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Hudes.
I had 2 questions about floor area, and the first one is regarding the comparison to the other houses in the immediate neighborhood and the square footage. I noticed that we left off the countable attic space in these analyses. Could you just maybe educate me on why that's not included?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. Staff receives their information about square footage for buildings from our county and town records. Not all county records include attic square footage. So the information we have here doesn't always include attic square footage when we're comparing adjacent neighbors. So I called that out in the staff report specifically.
Go ahead and follow up.
Again, regarding square footage and floor area, my understanding is that the floor area, including the countable, what is the floor area including the countable attic? What is the floor area ratio, including the countable attic?
So the question is, what is the proposed floor area with the attic?
Yes.
And the proposed project?
Yes.
That total is 4,466 square feet.
Right, it's the ratio that I'm really
Oh, the
inquiring
ratio.
about.
That would be 65.65.
That doesn't seem right.
So when we're looking at this site, we have to reduce the slope. The slope is greater than 10%, so we have to reduce the net to a net lot, and that reduces the net lot we're looking at, which is reduced from the 14,000 down to the 889 square feet.
Right, okay, so it's a 6889, and how's that calculated? How's that reduction calculated?
It's the hillside, or the code states that slopes that are greater than 10%, you take the net lot area shall be reduced based on the average slope. The average slope at this property is greater than 10%. It's actually 27.8%. There is a formula within the town code that you plug that into, as well as into the single-family design guidelines, and then that gives you a net lot.
Because you have more than a 50% reduction.
In this case, you do. Mhm.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, the maximum is a 60% reduction. So if you have a lot slope, an average lot slope that exceeds 30%, then the lot is reduced by 60%.
Okay.
So it's a range in between the typical FAR and a flat lot, all the way up to that maximum deduction, which would be 60%.
Okay, thank you.
I think Commissioner Hanson, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I had also another question related to the FAR. On the neighborhood analysis, it was clear that you did the neighborhood analysis independent of the slope of the lots, but there was a statement in the staff report that there's quite a few lots on that street that have a slope lot. So if you look at the current analysis, the only house in the neighborhood analysis is 4 Pennsylvania that's actually over the square footage, but we have no way of knowing, because you can't calculate every single house in the neighborhood, whether anyone else might have been over the FAR allowed. because of the slope. Is that right?
That's correct, and that's why we included this chart to show the basic gross numbers as well as, and not including attic.
And I had one follow-up question as well. On the, in terms of the space that they're adding underneath, my interpretation of reading the staff report and the letter from the applicant, and I can ask them as well, but currently there is that, when you talk about it being within the footprint, what that meant to me is there's actually that space is mapped out under the house already. It's just not tall enough to be livable areas. So if they lower it by 2 feet, then they'll add it. But it's not like they're going to be digging to make a space that didn't exist. It's going to be making that space that they already have usable. Is that a fair way to look at it?
That is correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Kane, actually Vice Chair Kane.
I'll answer to either one. Help me understand the effect of the slope calculations. So if you have a flat land, you have an FAR, it's standard formula. If you have a slope, then the FAR is going to be more constrained. Why is that? Because it's a difficult site to build?
So it is constraint-based. So typically, which makes sense, if you have a flat lot, you have less constraints than if you have a sloped lot. And so when the town adopted their floor area ratio guidelines, and I don't have all the background on that, they decided that it was appropriate to apply some reduction depending on slope, and so that is what the code requires.
Because
Typically, they'd be more constrained.
So, the logic in the slope having a deleterious effect on a project, what I'm concerned with is two things of a similar nature. One, the staff report recommends approval with conditions. And if I was to approve with conditions, I'd essentially be ignoring the effect of the slope language, the purpose that the slope language is there to make things purposefully more constrained because of that slope. And the second related question is, if the FAR has already been exceeded, on face value, it strikes me as unusual that we're going to exceed it more, and staff has recommended that that's okay. So I need to know that it's okay to agree with you. Because on its face, I'm thinking, well, this is black and white. I know nothing's black and white. But if it's already out of line and it's going to be more out of line, explain to me why that's okay and how I protect that language in the future.
So generally, the code has the provision that allows you to make specific findings, and if you're able to make those specific findings on a case-by-case basis, it allows you to exceed the FAR. If the code didn't allow those exceptions, then we'd be talking about a variance, we'd be having a different conversation. I think there was a recent project on, I'm probably going to miss the street, Monterey, where they were over the FAR, came before the Planning Commission because they wanted to add additional square footage and exceed the FAR further, and that was approved. And so you look at those on a case-by-case basis, and that lot happened to be flat. So it's really one of those ideas of, it's really the mass and scale that is shown via the architecture to represent the square footage. In this case, the mass and scale isn't, the bulk and mass is not going to change for the house. Yes, they are going to, as Commissioner Hanson mentioned, they're going to dig down a few extra feet so that they can get to a habitable height. And so by our requirements, then that requires the addition of both, in this case, both basement area and cellar area. So it's up to the commission. If the commission disagrees with staff's analysis, that's perfectly fine. We just think it's appropriate given that it will have no impact on the streetscape and mass and scale of the existing structure.
Let me see if I can put that into my language so I can use it in the future. We have reasons to protect the town, the neighborhood, et cetera, by having these constraining provisions. However, in this case, if I was to look at the house before and then turn around and magically look at it as an after, both pictures would look exactly alike?
The bulk and mass would not change.
Yes?
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? If not, we can go ahead and, I would like to hear from the applicant. I have a card here for Nikki Omida and Farhad Shafai. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
It's pretty good.
Okay.
Close enough. Good evening. Am I heard?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Good evening. My name is Nikki Omidi and Farhad Shafai. We're the owners of 16 Pennsylvania. Currently, we live in 16 Pennsylvania, and I'm just here to give you a bit of background about ourselves and to explain the logic behind why we decided to buy this house. We moved here last year from Canada, and I have two little kids, 4.5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and one of my primary goals is to establish a permanent base for them, because moving them from Ottawa over here at such a small age, I just want to give them some stability. And so everyone told us, look in Los Gatos. It's a perfectly quaint town they closed down streets on Halloween, which we loved, we used. And it's just perfect for our family. We love the nature of the town. We love the smallness of it, but at the same time, it's big. It's got history behind it. So we decided to buy 16 Pennsylvania, and the reason why we decided to buy it is because, first of all, we fell in love with the exterior and just with the nature of the house. It's not over the top like a lot of Victorian homes, but it's got character and girth to it. And we didn't have to do much to the outside. Sure, it is just a wobbly stair post, but that's about it. We didn't have to do much to the outside. We just needed to make the space inside livable for us. Right now, there's 2 bedrooms in the basement plus a bathroom, which we currently don't use. My husband and I are sleeping in the family room. My son's in the master, and my daughter's in the office, because it's important for me to stay on the same level with them, and because the foundation needs work and it's showing signs of mold. I wanted to keep off of that floor. We bought the house because the foundation needs to be replaced. And we figured, okay, if we can just replace the foundation. When we approached our architect the first time, he's like, don't go there, don't buy this house. You're going to come up in front of you guys. But anyway, we just loved it so much, we decided to gamble. So it just needs to go down by 2 feet. And we're looking to create a play space because, frankly, I love my kids, but I don't want to see toys in the family room on the main floor all the time. We wanted to put a bedroom down there so that we can stay on the same floor with them until my daughter's at least 5. If we decide to expand our family more, then we have the extra space. If not, we had great relations with our grown grandparents, and my parents and Farhad's parents are nearing retirement age, or already are at retirement age, and we'd like them to travel back and forth between Toronto and here a lot and stay with us. So a play space is what we're looking at, a bedroom is what we're looking at, and a home theater room, which is really our hobby. We moved to California, to be
Close to Hollywood.
close to Hollywood, exactly. So that's what we're proposing. We're not going to touch the footprint of the house. As Commissioner Kane said, you turn around, you look at the house before construction, you look at the house after. It's the same. And what's great about the project is that we have easy access from the driveway to get into, and my architect, Chris Spalding, will speak further to this. It's very easy to get to the area which we need to dig out. I'm just going to finish up by showing you some pictures that will perhaps give a better example of what we're looking at. Let's hope this works. Do I need to turn it on? These pictures are going to, they're looking in from the basement laundry room. They're showing there's a door that leads to the unfinished 6-foot clearance area. This door right here. It's 2 steps, you go up and you enter what I call spider-infested area. This is the door open.
You must take the mic with you if you leave the mic.
Stay there, just tell me to.
Okay, sure. Thanks. The next picture is just getting closer to the steps. This shows the unfinished area, about the 6-foot clearance. I'm sorry, it's not very clear. And the next picture is just the condition of the foundation. All that dark white spot is mold and water damage. With the heavy rain we have had standing water in the basement. What's great, great from a history buff perspective is you can see actually the planks they used back in about over 100 years ago, and the nail and all that still in the wall. That's how old the foundation is. So that needs to be replaced. And we're just proposing to dig 2 feet down right there where it is, the same footprint. And that's it. I just wanted to give you a background about ourselves, and do you have anything to add?
No, covered it all.
Yeah. I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
A minute left.
Chris Spalding, architect, 801 Camilla Street in Berkeley. So this lot kind of has the perfect storm of getting hit by Town of Los Gatos rules. So if you look at the site plan, there's the lot's slopey, but in the back, there's an embankment that puts that slope up almost to 30%. So, you know, the apparent FAR, the lot size after being slope adjusted turns into a tiny little lot when it's in actuality a nice big lot. The other thing is it's got an existing attic. This is too bright, can't really see it. But we get dinged for that existing attic too, so again, it makes the house seem a lot larger than it actually is. And the cellar has a ceiling, the part that we want to lower the floor in has a 6.5-foot ceiling. If they had built it 100 years ago with 6 more inches, it would have been living area, or considered living area under the town rules, and this would have all been a moot exercise. So we're just trying to make that space usable, which is already there, and it does not change the bulk of the house, the shape of the house. The house does not raise at all. It's just underneath the house, the foundation is dropping slightly. So it's in text, it seems a lot more alarming than what they're actually trying to achieve. And it seems like it's a much larger house than it actually is.
Are there other questions? Yes, Commissioner Hanson?
I'm trying to think of the right way to ask the question. In looking at the size of the existing house, I was surprised. My first question is, after this is all done, if it's approved, the house will have 4 bedrooms. Is that correct?
Yes.
So right now it has 3, but it's almost a 4,000 square foot house. I was just curious, from an architect's perspective. I mean, usually when you have a house that large, it would have, adequate bedrooms. And I saw that the first floor is being remodeled, but it's basically was just moving a few things around versus adding bedrooms.
Yeah, so currently it's 2,900 square feet plus the attic.
Plus the attic.
Yeah, so current living space is 2,900.
Well, the attic isn't livable.
No.
I mean, it's counted as livable space.
We have to count it because at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
top it's over 7 feet, so then you have to count it down to 5 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there was a comment from the Historic Preservation Committee about changing the windows, and it was said in our staff report that that you had changed that. But my question was, on the drawings that we have in our packet, does that reflect the changes that was requested by the Historic Preservation Committee
Yeah,
to change the window alignment?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That was my questions.
Yes, Commissioner Janoff?
Just waiting for the formal. Yeah, so I was actually on the Historic Preservation Committee at the time this applicant came before us. And the primary change that the committee requested was to align the windows in the front under the existing windows. So the new windows, which would be for the basement area, we're a little bit off relative to the aspect of the house, and so we asked those to be aligned. And that is reflected in the drawings, thank you. So my question for you is, I noticed that almost all of the drawings have been updated to a February 13th, 2017 date. And I don't recall the Historic Preservation Committee approving, as I recall, we discussed the windows in the bathroom or in the closet area because they interfered with some of the new partitions. And so the two that are removed and the two that are replaced on that side, on that elevation, that I recall. However, there's a new double window in the master bathroom in place of a single double hung. And my question is, did the Historic Preservation Committee approve that double window at the time you came before us? I don't see that reflected in the notes, and I want to verify that.
My recollection is we already had that window on what we brought before the historic.
Okay, so these plans, other than the change to the front elevation, haven't changed since
The only
HPC?
alteration I made, if I remember correctly, in response to the comments from the Historic Committee was to change the windows on the front elevation.
Front elevation.
Yeah.
Then why are the other sheets updated? Where I'm looking at other changes to windows and things, and I'm just raised a red flag in my mind.
Well, we've updated them in response to comments from the Planning Department and the Engineering Department.
And did those changes change the windows
No.
specifically that HPC had approved? Because you know the HPC is pretty picky about windows. I just want to make sure that we respect the decision that the HPC had made at that time.
Sure, that's fine. If you're happy, that's fine.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? If not, thank you, and we'll consider some other people, and then we'll call you back for any rebuttal or additional testimony. Next card I have is Philip Murray. So that's fine. I just had a card. Okay, then we've already heard from Mr. Spalding. I have a card for him. And then I have Doug Richards.
Thank you. I haven't met you. I'm your neighbor. I'm Doug Richards. I'm the owner of the house at 3 Pennsylvania that's listed in the report. When I looked at the information, what I was struck by was what Vice Chairman Kane talked about, which is if you approve this, why not approve any exceedance of a lot? Because it's such a dramatic exceedance. But I didn't know the story, didn't know the backstory, I wasn't contacted, so I didn't have any of that background. So if in fact, if it is not changing the exterior, it is the same form and it stays with the historic intent of the neighborhood and is consistent with the rest of the design in the neighborhood, we're fine with it. We understand what they're trying to do. We were also concerned because this house for the last 4 years has been a rental, and it's flipped many times, and so we were concerned about an expansion to just be a bigger Airbnb. And so if you're staying and you're in the house and for the intentions you mentioned, we're good. Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Those are all the cards I have, so I can call you back, the applicant, if you have anything to add. Obviously, there's nothing to rebut.
Thanks. Nice to meet you. Thanks. Doug, I actually reached out to his daughter. I called the number I was given, and I spoke with your daughter, and I gave my information. I guess it wasn't forward, and I knocked on his door once. Dog barked, and I didn't want to scare your dog a bit more. So I'm glad to meet you. Thank you for supporting us.
We're happy to help.
That's it.
All right, so we will close the public input of this public hearing, and I'll ask for any discussion or a motion. Commissioner Birch?
So to bring back something Mr. Kane was discussing, we obviously take the guidelines of the FAR very seriously. But as Joel pointed out, we look at everything on a case-by-case basis. And the way I'm looking at this, just to have some discussion with my fellow commissioners, is while the home already exceeds the FAR and will be exceeding the FAR a little bit more, as it is not changing anything in the existing footprint, bulk and mass, architectural style of the neighborhood, if I'm looking at this as just a standalone case, I see this as something I would feel very positive towards. As a mother, I fully understand the reasoning behind it, and feel that it's unfortunate that that wasn't made usable space earlier, so it's just making this a bit more of a practical application.
Yes, Commissioner Janoff?
My guess is that the house exceeded the floor area ratio before the floor area ratio was in existence. As old as this house is, so it kind of is irrelevant in that respect because it was there. And the additional excess FAR, I don't think exacerbates the situation. I think for me, it's a rare opportunity to expand and modernize an historic home without changing an iota, minus the windows, of the exterior. And so it really does what the town wants in terms of preserving the historic, but creating a modern, livable space. So I'm in support of the applicant.
Commissioner Hanson?
When I was reading the staff report, I had some of the same comments that that Commissioner Birch and Commissioner Janoff made. When I went to visit the property, one thing that really struck me is considering the size of the house. If you look at just at the front of it, it's actually looks pretty small. And I drove up and down the neighborhood, and there's actually quite a few houses that are really well designed like that, where the house actually has much more depth into the lot. But when you look at the front of it, it's not very big and imposing. So when I considered that, and also that there was already this space kind of mapped out, it just wasn't tall enough. I think this is a really, as Commissioner Birch said, we don't like to normally allow the largest house in the neighborhood, but since it was already there and this is kind of a special situation, I think the request is perfectly reasonable.
Yes. One more comment?
We may be ready for a motion, which I'd be ready to make.
Please, please.
All right. So I move to approve Architecture and Site Application S-16-064, requesting approval to exceed the allowable floor area ratio for an addition to an existing two-story pre-1941 single-family residence on property zoned R-1D. I can make the required findings for CEQA. I can make the required compliance with the residential design guidelines. I can make the required findings for exceeding the maximum floor area ratio as required by Town Code Section 29.40.075, that the design theme, sense of scale, exterior materials, and details of the proposed project are consistent with the provisions of A, B, and C, that the lot coverage, setbacks, and FAR of the proposed project is compatible with the development on surrounding lots, being that the addition does not add any bulk, mass, or height, and is completely within the existing footprint of the residence. I can make that finding. And I can also make the required considerations in review of the architecture and site applications as required by Section 29.20.150.
Thank you, Commissioner Badami. Is there a second? Commissioner Hudez?
Second the motion.
Is there any discussion? Vice Chair Kane?
I want to add that we have a letter from a Mr. Kennedy asking the question, because he's concerned about the project. He says, is the town of Los Gatos considering increasing FAR limits for everyone or just the applicant? I had the same question, and I'd like to share with Mr. Kennedy that I believe it's a legitimate question, and I think staff gave a good answer for it, so I will be supporting the motion. I just wanted to get his comment on file. I appreciate all the letters we get, pros and cons.
All right, I think I'll call the question then. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. All right, the next matter we have is 91 and 101, pardon me? Oh, pardon me, appeal rights.
Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision. The decision must be filed in 10 days. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the form for filing an appeal is available in the clerk's office.
Thank you. This is item 5, 91 and 101 West Main Street, conditional use permit application. So I'll ask for the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The project in front of you tonight is the proposal from the applicant, Los Gatos Coffee Roasting Company, requesting approval of a modification to their CUP, or conditional use permit, at 91 through 101 West Main Street. Specifically, the applicant is requesting to modify the existing conditions of approval to allow on-site beer and wine service, as well as off-site beer and wine sales in compliance with the town's alcoholic beverage policy. The applicant is also requesting to modify existing conditions of approval to allow live entertainment before 10 o'clock p.m. and to allow hours of operation from 6 o'clock a.m. to 11 o'clock p.m. 7 days a week. The project is being considered by the Planning Commission this evening, as any request for new alcohol service requires your review and recommendation to the Town Council. Additionally, any modifications to an existing CUP, including conditions of approval, shall be approved by the Planning Commission. As described in the staff report, the project proposes no additional square footage or seating, and as such, there would be no increases in required parking. Written comments regarding the request were submitted to staff and have been included in Exhibit 10. The proposed use is in conformance with the town code and is consistent with the general plan. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the findings in Exhibit 2 and consider making a recommendation to the Town Council for approval of the project with conditions of approval as shown in Exhibit 3. This completes staff's presentation. However, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. There are questions. I'm going to start at the far end. Commissioner Hudes.
I had a question about condition number 7 on Exhibit 3. It's about the securable barrier, and there's a condition that the applicant must maintain a securable barrier between 101 and 109 West Main Street. It seems as in the original conditions that was related to special events. Is there a reason to require a securable barrier if there's not the same requirement on special events?
That condition was produced as a result of the previous conditional use permit that was approved at the space. That was for the Simpatico Pizza that's at 109 West Main Street. During that time, they were authorized to have alcohol sales with their conditional use permit, and as a result of that, the Commission and Town Council felt that it appropriate that a barrier separate those suites at all time. At which point a permanent barrier has been constructed and still remains.
Yes, go ahead.
So why is there the need to have a securable barrier?
At this point, it would be to just maintain the separation of the two suites as well as the two conditional use permits.
Okay.
And so for staff's perspective, if down the line someone wanted to, opened it up without the town's approval, we would go back to the CUP and require that they have some kind of barrier between the two suites to separate them, unless they decided to come in and modify one or both of the conditions of approval for the CUPs.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Hanson.
I had several questions. I think they're all pretty short. Off-site beer and wine service, there was a specific condition mentioned about they weren't going to be serving beer and wine outside. So could you just help me understand what off-site beer and wine sales are then?
Yes, so the applicant is proposing both on-site beer and wine service, so that would be for on-site consumption served with a meal. They're also proposing off-site beer and wine sales, so that's proposed for off-site consumption. So it'd be like buying a bottle of beer or a bottle of wine to take home.
Okay, all right, so because they have a retail shop now where you could buy coffee, so that they would have beer and wine that you could buy and take home with you. Okay, that clears that up. Second question, are there other restaurants with a CUP that have operating ability till 11 p.m.? I just did my own quick sanity check of every place I knew in the area, and I was finding lots of 8 and 9 and 9:30 and maybe one 10 o'clock, but no, I didn't find any 11 o'clock. So are you aware of other restaurants in the area that are allowed to stay open till 11?
I don't have the specific operating hours for the other businesses, so unfortunately I can't answer that at this time.
And just to add to that, there are a number of businesses that have conditional use permits that do permit hours that late and even later. However, many businesses choose not to exercise the full use of those. We could try to pull up on the iPad, I can try to pull up existing conditional use permits while you're going through the public hearing and see if I can get a few of them that have that. For instance, I'm very sure that Holtz has that opportunity to go to at least 11, if not later, and that is a restaurant. Gardino's also goes past that. So there are other businesses that do have hours that late. Many of them just don't exercise that option.
Okay, so it's a question of what they're permitted to do, but versus the choice that they make in actually operating their business.
Correct.
All right, and then I'll just make my last question for now. This is related to, comparing to other restaurants, and the thing that kind of that came up in my mind is, well, if is this a trend where coffee places are wanting to do beer and wine? And when I did some research, it seemed like Starbucks had started going down that path, and then they were kind of pulling back on it to a certain extent. So the thing I worried about was, are we going to get a bunch of other requests now to do beer and wine in addition to coffee for every other coffee place in Los Gatos? So do we have? But I thought maybe I just don't know. Are there other similar coffee places that are thinking about doing beer and wine, or are doing it already?
Like you said, Starbucks had originally started that process, but for whatever reason decided not to follow through. I'm not familiar with any other coffee establishments that serve beer and wine, although the existing CUP for this space is actually for a restaurant rather than but it is specifically a coffee shop, but it is for a restaurant.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Badami.
Oh, I just wanted to add Grill 57 onto the list when we were trying to remember restaurants or bars that had been approved for late night service. And that was something that came before the Planning Commission a couple years ago that we did approve. It's right by my house, so I know for a fact. But add Grill 57 along with Holtz for Commissioner Hanson.
Before I call in Vice Chair Kane, he pointed out to me that I had not asked if all of us have visited. It seemed to me unlikely that anybody hasn't visited. But may I see a show of hands for all who have visited the site? Thank you. All right, Commissioner Kane, Vice Chair Kane.
I get promoted and fired 5 times a night. I had the same concern as Commissioner Hanson when I read the staff report, and I was curious about the use of the words off-site for consumption of beer and wine, or how that could be misunderstood. I visited the site and saw the benches outside the facility. Now, these are used all day long by folks who buy coffee and go outside and sit and drink their coffee. And I said to the applicant, would these benches be used for consumption of beer and wine? And the answer was hell no. But the staff report was not solid on that point of what does off-site mean.
Is this a liquor license issue? Because the off-site is, I believe, is an ABC requirement. It answers itself. Off-site sales are like a liquor store, if I recall correctly.
They wouldn't be able to, because there wouldn't be that separation barrier from the public to where they were, and they couldn't get a barrier where their little benches are, so there's no possibility ABC would allow it. But if that is a concern, you could also make certain that, and you could put that as a condition, that it was.
Yeah, I don't know anywhere in town where they sit outside on a bench and.
So the new German restaurant,
Nosh Cafe.
Nosh, they have but as you can see, there's a barrier around them. So ABC requires anytime there's alcohol sales that allow it for outside. So even if you buy it there for not even the off-site consumption, even if you buy it there and you're drinking inside and you want to go outside on that little area, it's not going to be allowed under ABC because you have to have some separation barrier, a patio area, and there's not enough room for that.
All right, thank you.
There's also been, it is listed in Condition 6 that no beer and wine sales or service shall take place in the outdoor seating area.
All right, are there other questions? If not, I will call on the applicant, Terry Hope.
Good evening, and thank you for hearing me tonight. I really appreciate the fact that the town has found the wisdom to allow entertainment in the evenings in businesses, and so I was excited about that, as well as other ways I could augment my business. First of all, I'm Terry Hope. I live at 212 Bella Vista Avenue. I'm born and raised in Los Gatos, and I've had my business here on West Main Street for 35 years. And counting. Tonight, I'm asking for the CUP modification to eliminate the conditions that are currently imposed on my business, which restrict entertainment specifically. I'm also asking to amend my hours of operation and add the service of beer and wine to my conditional use permit. My plan is to offer a traditional coffeehouse style entertainment such as jazz, acoustic music, folk music, bluegrass, and poetry reading, as well as open mic nights. The music and poetry performances will allow the business to provide an additional attraction for clientele and allow my business to be on par with other establishments that are offering a venue for light entertainment under the town's new entertainment ordinance. In conjunction with this application, I am also requesting the addition of a Type 20 and Type 41 beer and wine licenses with the intention of serving locally produced boutique wines and craft beers with meals inside my cafe, and for retail sales for beer and wine to take home. I'm also requesting the addition of a tasting area to allow for measured pours and wine tasting and wine appreciation activities in a limited area of my operation. I am requesting these changes so my business can remain competitive in an evolving marketplace by adding complementary products and services which meet the expectations of today's sophisticated clientele. Expanding the beverage options to include beer and wine will allow a more desirable evening dining experience for my customers, complement the entertainment, and add a new revenue to support my ever-growing overhead of my business. I believe my cafe's bistro-style menu and casual coffeehouse environment will add a unique and affordable blend of services which will enhance the variety of the offerings in our downtown and is in keeping with the town's general plan. So I ask for your recommendation to go to council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see if there are any questions. Are there questions? Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you answer the question that I was asking staff about why you want to be open till 11? And here's what I was thinking. I was like, well, all these other places are closed down, and it's really quiet around there, and then you can't have entertainment past 10. Why would you stay open till 11?
Well, currently my CUP allows me to be open till 10 p.m.
Right.
I'm assuming if I'm doing entertainment and service till 10 p.m., as we would complete entertainment and service of beer and wine at 10 p.m., we'd still need some time to wrap up the evening and have people leave the premises and for us to, clean up the facilities. So I'm asking for the 1 hour addition there. And I would assume also that I would probably not be using it on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, but rather on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday evenings when it's normal for pedestrians to be out in the evening walking around and enjoying entertainment or a glass of wine.
Okay, and then a follow-up question. The beer and wine sales would be limited to inside versus outside.
Absolutely.
Other than what they take. But what about the entertainment? There's nothing in the terms and conditions that I saw. Is there any chance that you would be doing poetry reading or acoustic music outside?
Well, my building, fronts on the sidewalk, so we don't do any service outside the front door, and it's all lockable, closable, and partitioned essentially. So, and in accordance with ABC laws, we would not be serving outdoors on public sidewalks. That simply wouldn't happen.
So there would be no point in having the entertainment out there either.
We would not have
Yeah.
entertainment outdoors, and we would not serve outdoors or allow clientele to leave the front door with any wine, aside from a bottle that was not opened that they were taking home, they had purchased for retail for take-home consumption.
And then one last question
Yes.
for me. The alcohol policy requires there to be food served with beer and wine, but there's an exception made for tastings. And I just remembered, like, for instance, going to Testarossa for tasting, and food was kind of a big part of that. And you can actually end up consuming a fair amount of wine, and so you'd probably want. I mean, is it an option for people to have food? I
Absolutely.
mean, would you encourage them to?
Absolutely.
I mean,
more than 50% of my sales today are food-related products, not beverage. So we do savory crepes, dessert crepes. We have a variety of cheese platters and meat platters and things like that that we will be making available and expanding our menu, indeed, to meet the evening desires of people who are having a light evening meal. And that would be included. We always like to have a food item to complement wine.
And you would offer that for tastings as well as
For tastings, it would be included in the service as a complimentary item, and then it would be for purchase with a glass of wine if you were seated in the cafe.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Janoff?
Just a clarification, excuse me, because I was confused. On Exhibit 5, your application, your written description of the project, your hours of operation state that you propose expanding your hours of operation Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday until 10 p.m. But in the CUP, you're asking for it to be extended until 11, and in your comments, you're asking for it to be extended to 11. So if this document is going to follow a favorable recommendation, I would suggest that it be corrected so that it reflects what you've told us and is consistent with the CUP.
My original submittal included the earlier hours and more limited hours, and when I met with staff, they encouraged me to be consistent, and so my updated information that I submitted had the more expanded hours.
Okay, so that's not what I see, but it's minor, but I was confused about the 11 or 10 or 10 or 11.
Staff can address that either now or, so I'll address that now. Ms. Hope is correct. There's also, things evolve over time, and so it doesn't make sense to, if the commission decides to make a recommendation of approval to the council and that it's appropriate all 7 days a week, to limit that. Otherwise, what happens is there's a large expense and time incurred to come back in 2 or 5 or 8 years to modify it, to add Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday should things change. And so the hours are requested to 11. She already has approval to go to 10. And then the days of the week, that was staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Excuse me, my issue wasn't with the CUP. Pardon me, it was with the written description of the project, which says they'll only operate until 10.
Yeah.
So you might just want to change that to reflect 11 p.m. on those days that there may be a desire to be open later.
Sure, and we typically go with the CUP conditions. We don't go back to the letter of justification unless there's an issue that comes up that we need to further research.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Hope. There are no other cards, so I assume you're through, but you now arguably have more time.
Thank you very much. I think I'm finished with my presentation. Thank you for your consideration and your time.
Thank you. Well, I'll close the public comment. And now I'll ask if there are any questions or comments or a motion. Vice Chair Kane.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Please do.
In covering the preamble, that as staff said, the proposed use is desirable to the public convenience and welfare, and that it will provide a dining entertainment option for residents and visitors downtown. This business has been there. It is in its 36th year. It is part of the town brand, and there has been extraordinary involvement on the part of the owner and the employees in town affairs. So I think that covers the essential, desirable public welfare. So I say I can make the finding that the proposed project is categorically exempt, subject to Section 15301 of CEQA, as adopted by the town. I make the required finding as required by Section 292190 of the Town Code for granting approval of a CUP, and I suggest we recommend to Town Council approval of the CUP application U16-008 with the conditions contained in Exhibit 3.
Commissioner Badami,
I second the motion.
any comments? I'll call the question then. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Appeal rights?
Since this is a recommendation, there are no appeal rights. It will be forwarded to the town council for consideration.
Thank you. All right, so that we're now almost at the end of the agenda. We're at other business, and I would ask, is there a report from the Director of Community Development?
Yes, thank you. Since we last met with the Planning Commission, obviously, we want to thank you all for participating in the study session with the town council. And then last night, the council had a hearing where they considered 3 items that had been before the Planning Commission before. One was the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, which they adopted. Second was the toll house. For the second time, they actually adopted a resolution approving the modification with the addition of an operating agreement that they also reviewed. And then the third item was an appeal of the decision of the Planning Commission for the Gumtree Lane project. Ultimately, the council denied the appeals and approved the project as was reviewed by the Planning Commission. And that concludes my report, and if anyone has any questions, myself and the town attorney are here.
Are any questions from commissioners or any comments? Otherwise, we will adjourn the meeting.